Started this afternoon. We do have a quorum, note for the record. Mike, what have we got before us? We'll go ahead.
Okay. Behind tab 1, H3482, the property tax installment payment.
I got it. I'll take it. Members, the code currently allows a county, if it's authorized by county council, to have the treasurer collect the property taxes in installments. In any event, it's always due by January 15th of the following taxable year. But there is an option or an opportunity for a county to let estimates be paid as you go along, sort of like the escrow payments you make with mortgages sometimes. This particular bill would allow the treasurer to do other types of installments, have more discretion in regard to the installments, maybe take it in 10 installments or 5 installments or 7 installments, if the county authorizes the treasurer to do that. So it would still take county council to authorize the treasurer. It would just allow the treasurer, if the county thought it was good public policy, to give them more discretion in setting up those installments. It would still be due in full by January 15th of the year following the taxable year. So it has to be paid in full by that time. But this just allows for it to be paid in installments other than as prescribed in the code right now.
So do you have a recommendation for us?
It was a favorable report out of committee, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman?
Orlando.
Thank you, and I support the legislation. I may want to either, may obviously not amend today, but on the floor, I've got a situation, Mr. Chairman, where it just has been brought to my attention where someone that they didn't have their tax notice, they did not receive it, and they did not get an additional notice until after April 1st. And so they had many penalties. So I may want to try to see if we could do something where they at least could allow the counties to send out a notice around February 1st. So that for those that have not paid their
So instead
taxes.
of notice of a delinquency, instead of it being in April, have it send it in February?
Yes, sir. Yeah, just.
I mean,
They may do it, doesn't require them to do it.
Yeah.
I would do it, I'll hold it to the floor,
Okay.
but I will, unless we just want to adopt that. But,
okay. I'll work
Right
with
now,
Senator.
they'd accumulated about $800 and something, I think, in penalties as a result of not being notified until April that they had not paid that particular tax from that standpoint. So, and obviously, they didn't get their bill, never had been delinquent before, so,
I'll be happy to work with you on that on the floor.
thank you.
Move favorable report,
Mr.
Mr. Chairman.
Chairman, I got a question.
That's
Son from Beaufort, and I know you deal in this area. Is there any language in there that the county has to provide the amount that they've been paid on a, whatever it's quarterly or monthly basis, timely to anyone requesting that? For example, when you close a real estate transaction, you want to know how much taxes are due, and they're holding X amount of dollars, you're going to need to know that amount potentially.
Yeah, typically in a real estate transaction, if you don't know what the taxes are going to be because it's in arrears, you typically take last year's, and we, as a matter of course, increase it by 5% or 10% and then prorate. But I guess your question is, since they're already estimating here for purposes of making the installments, is that information in regard to their estimate available to somebody making inquiries so that they could do prorations? Is that the
And
question?
the estimate saying how much they may be holding of the seller's money.
I would imagine that's a good question. I would imagine that's public information, but that'd be good for a closing attorney to know.
Well,
because,
it might be public information, but if it takes them 30 days to get
Right.
you the information, you know what that does to
Right.
the real estate market in closing.
I'll work on an amendment with you in that
Okay.
regard too. I think that's a great idea. I didn't think about it being public information that could be used in a
I'm
closing.
not gonna try to hold it up, but I do think
Yeah.
it needs to be addressed.
That's a good point.
Anyone else? Comments, questions?
Wish I had these guys on the subcommittee, Mr. Chairman. This is a great idea. So it was
They'll be there
me and
next.
Mr. Allen were pulling this thing down on our own. But
They'll probably be there next time, subcommittee.
yes, sir.
That'll learn you.
I withdraw my question.
Anyone else? You've heard a recommendation to report out favorable. A second. Any discussion on that? Hearing none, any objection to reporting out favorable? Hearing none is out. What's the next one?
Mr. Chairman, next one is H 3354, which is an anticipatory thing. I mean, currently, no assessors are when people put solar panels on their homes, there currently is no assessor that then, takes that as being an improvement, increases the assessable value. But we're anticipating as more and more people put solar panels on their homes, that some assessors may look at that as being a material improvement and take that as a reason to increase the assessed property tax. This makes clear or states that irrespective of whether or not the homeowner's solar panel is owned or leased, that solar panel is not to be considered by the assessor when they're determining the assessed taxable value. I'm sorry, I'd like to recognize you. The chairman does that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just, I guess, a practical question. I'm going to get put on a subcommittee now, I just realized.
That's right. It's getting bigger and bigger.
Bigger and bigger all the time. But a practical question, if you put solar panels on your house and theoretically the seller sells the house at a higher price, the house has greater value, assume that you sell it for whatever you sell it for and someone's willing to pay more because of the solar panels, that would get captured because they're getting a lot of their data from the past sales of those properties. I guess it gets captured in that way, in an indirect way, but you're saying not in a direct way.
Yeah, I mean, and I guess if I'm the homeowner and if I put a solar panel on there, I'd add that to my basis for purpose of gain. But so it's really a public policy question on our part. Do we want to encourage people to get solar panels? It's a way to facilitate that. It's an exception. I mean, you can make the argument that it's a fixture because it does become attached to the roof, so it is a fixture. So let's call it what it is. It'd be an exemption.
But there's not much you could do about an indirect increase in the taxable amount. If you sell the house and they make their judgment, if the assessor makes their judgment on the sales price.
Yeah, that'll be reflected in whatever the sales price is. That'll be their assessed value going forward. So in essence, that's when they're going to capture it probably.
It gets captured in a backwards sort of way, right?
Then I have a question on that.
Yes, sir.
Our area, shortage of homes, no inventory. Home comes on the market, get 3 or 4 bids on it, or, offers on it, same day. That, of course, runs the price up. What does that do to the taxes?
Well, in terms of when the property is ultimately sold, the assessor is going to take note of that transfer. They're going to look at that sales price, and that's going to be the basis for the assessed value going forward. I'm sorry, is that responsive?
So in that case, and my wife's in real estate, it's not uncommon to go in and say, okay, you're from California, you want this home, right? Yes. Think you ought to go $20,000 over the asking price. What does that do to the taxes?
It's going to raise them. It's going to raise them.
Scott?
A couple things, Mr. Chairman. When you first back to his what the chairman's question was, it just increased the comp values, meaning that property in that particular area is selling above what the normal estimated competitive prices in that market would be, which is actually drive the appraised value up. And sometimes you have that. Given how fast the market is moving, it is possible to have 2 or 3 offers above what the asking price. And so that makes the determination of what the new appraised value is going to be for properties within that particular
Yeah, that's a
area.
good point. I mean, in addition to the property sold assessed value going up every 5 years when they do the countywide reassessment,
Assessment.
they're going to look at what the values of the property are in that area. And you're right, that's going to reflect.
So
That's going to increase it for the rest of the area.
Assessed value and competitive market, those are 2 different things. The competitive market, when you look within the 3 miles or 5 mile area of similar prices per square foot, they determine what the value is. Now back to what the assessors will look at, the other question is whether or not, and I support this bill, is whether or not the solar is the sole energy related to the house. Is it solar based on water heaters or a heating system as well? It just depends. Now, some of the solar systems cost a whole lot more, but if you're just putting panels on a house, the panels on the house may end up being the only form of heat. So when he's check it off, he's got to check gas, oil, heat, wood, or whatever. In this particular case, he would check all solar as the heat. I don't think it's going to drive the price up unless it's one of the newer properties that was designed for total solar. And they've got some stuff out there now, and we had them before. They came before, I think this committee a couple while back, to getting tax credit where it actually drilled into the ground to do solar, and that was for solar water heaters and so forth and so on. So I want to be careful in how we do this, but right now, just the panels on the house, I can support this. But later on down the road, when we get a lot more sophisticated with the different type of solar systems that's out there, we may have to come back and revisit this.
Senator Goldfinch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't know if there are any other questions, but, or if you want to adopt the subcommittee report, I've got a proposed amendment at the appropriate time.
Yeah, there was, I don't think we amended it in subcommittee, did we, Morgan? No. So if you want to put it up.
Is now the appropriate time, Mr. Chairman? All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's germane, but sort of unrelated. It's a technical fix we're trying to clean up from an amendment that we made back in, I think, 2018. Property tax issue, assessment of property tax issue in Chapter 37. Basically, these public housing, and the amendment's being passed out to you right now, staff's passing that out. The Charleston Housing Authority brought this to my attention. I'm sure it's an issue in your district as well. But these public-private partnerships for low-income housing and extremely low-income housing have run into an issue with the last amendment we had. Basically, the last amendment we had included a word that should not have been included, and the word was "and improvements." The effect of that would have been, as the amended statute reads, would be that it requires the public authority or a nonprofit to own the improvements as well in order for the property to remain tax exempt. Now, that was not the intent of the statute. That was not the intent of the amendment. Everybody agrees on that, and so this amendment is a technical cleanup amendment which simply scratches that one, well, I think it's 3 words, "and improvements to get us back to the intent of the statute, to keep these things tax exempt and to keep these public-private partnerships going. If there are no questions, I'll move for adoption.
So, do you have a second to that recommendation? Second. Motion, second. Discussion? Objection? None. The amendment's adopted.
Thank you.
So, Senator Davis, you want to look at reporting out favorable as amended?
Yes, sir, as amended, and I'd also like to have Senator Goldfinch on my subcommittee as well. So it's
You're going to have a big
yeah,
subcommittee.
no, it's,
Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, any objection? Reported out favorable. What's the next one?
Mr. Chairman, the next one is mine as well, and it's the last one, and it's the bill that I authored called the County Green Space Sales Tax Act. What this would allow a county to do by a majority vote that's then approved by referendum submitted to the people to impose a 1-cent sales tax for the purpose of amortizing bonds that would be used to purchase up green space, open space, development rights, things of that nature. And it's limited to coastal counties. And the reason I did that is I've noticed that there's so much building going on in Beaufort County right now. It's really destroying the ecosystem. I mean, the environment down there can't sustain that type of development. And we're at a point now where even though Beaufort is densely developed, there are more lots that have been approved for development and more units that have been approved in development agreements than there are existing improvements. And if it's built out in its entirety, you're going to have, and no criticism meant here to Mount Pleasant, but it's going to look like Mount Pleasant. And so there's a lot of people down in Beaufort County that want to be proactive about doing something about that. This would allow coastal counties that are inordinately impacted by overdevelopment to purchase up open space, green space, and development densities. So that's what this particular bill would do. Upon a majority vote of the county council submitted to the people for a referendum, they would have to specify the amount of the bonds they want amortized, the purposes for which they're going to use the bond proceeds, the duration of the time that the sales tax would be in place. And there's a number of co-sponsors on this particular bill, not exclusively from the coastal area, but in large measure from the coastal area.
Mr. Chairman,
That's up.
Senator from Beaufort, I don't have a problem with Bill, but I don't know why we'd limit it just to the coastal counties. If you're gonna give one county an opportunity, why shouldn't every county have the opportunity to do that?
And I'm fine with that. I just didn't want to presume in terms of, I was drafting something that was particular to an area that I was familiar with, but if there is a sentiment that others want to do that as well, I'm fine with that as well. I just didn't want to be presumptuous in that regard.
At the appropriate time, I'll move to do that, Mr. Chairman, but I'll wait to hear from others.
And I would, Mr. Chairman?
Senator Bennett and Senator Alexander.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not going to oppose or hold up the bill. I just feel necessary to say between a green space sales tax, a school building sales tax, a road construction sales tax, a capital improvement sales tax, before we get to it, I mean, we're going to have about as much local government as, I think the old saying goes, as much as we can afford. It just does give me concern, particularly in some of these counties that, mine in particular, and not that we wouldn't benefit from something like this, but, you know, there are some sales taxes that, the sheer design of them are to utilize folks who don't necessarily live in those communities to pay those sales taxes. And that's fine for tourism activities, but we're experiencing something in Dorchester County that neighboring county is using it for a school construction process, or wants to. But all of the residents of Dorchester County are going to be the ones that pay for the neighboring county schools. So those types of things just give me pause and concern. I certainly understand where you come from.
Yeah.
I'm certainly not going to hold it up. I just felt necessary to
Yeah,
share that perspective.
I share that, and I'm reluctant to do these things as well, but it truly is, in my judgment, an existential threat down there for us, and we're about to lose something forever. And I take your point on that. I mean, you can overload the wagon so much that you can't pull it anymore. I get it, but I did think it through and kind of weighed that balance and figured it was on balance worth doing.
Let me weigh in on this if I may. Senator Bennett, the people vote on this, don't they?
Yes, sir. They do.
So I'd like for our constituents to weigh in on a vote.
Mr. Chairman, I agree with that. It certainly is, and I'm certainly, I think the closer you can make the decisions to the people, the better. But in some instances, the people that vote for it aren't the ones that are paying for it. And in some neighboring communities like ours, one community may vote for it, but they're placing the burden on their neighbor, and that's always a challenge.
But Senator, I see the vote would be held in general election. So Senator Fanning?
See if Senator Yu for a question.
Senator Yields.
Interested in your subcommittee recommendation at the bottom. Is it as simple as clicking Alt plus R and the vote will just, if you look at the bottom of the page, the subcommittee recommendation, that makes it easy. I'd never clicked Alt R, and that is an easy way to pass. Thank you, Mr. President.
I got no explanation for that.
Mr. Senator Alexander.
Thank you, and I support the legislation, and I guess I wanted to follow up on the two comments. I mean, in Oconee County, we've had numerous votes on sales tax, and they've all failed. So I think given the county council the ability to do this, we have a conservation bank, Oconee Conservation Bank, and because of the beautiful Blue Ridge foothills of the mountains and the rolling farmland. So I would see this as the opportunity for those individuals if we adopt, and I would second that motion on the amendment to include other counties, because this would be a funding mechanism if the citizens so chose to continue to make sure that funds are available for our local conservation bank from that standpoint. So,
Mr. Chairman,
at the appropriate time, I'll second.
and that's, if the amendment, that's fine. We would have to rework some of these whereas clauses I have in the beginning, because the whereas clauses are findings of fact that are particular to coastal counties, and that's not going to be hard to change, but I could work with staff on making those whereas clause changes too.
Said Scott.
And a complete right of Article 10, where you define just the county green space sales tax, because you identify, and the rewrite of Article 10 as well. Just so it
I'm
becomes-
sorry, Senator, I didn't hear.
Page 3 of your bill, you got to rewrite that whole section over again, because you identify, unless you write another article that actually talk about other counties and their participation.
Well, I think if it's in regard to subparagraph 2 on page 3, all of those particular interests in land, they'd be applicable to other areas of the state too. They're not unique to the coast. What I tried to make clear is, if we're going to solve the problem in Beaufort, for instance, we're not going to get there by just buying fee simple title to open space. You're going to have to go in to development agreements and buy up densities. You're going to have to go into PUDs and buy up densities. And so I tried to be as inclusive as I could in regard to the types of real property interests.
And you were, I'm saying, but if you're going to include these other counties,
Yeah.
Article 10 is so narrowly defined what coastal zoning counties are.
Yeah.
And if you're going to include it, like the.
Oh, no, we changed that definition to make it clear that it'd be a statewide applicability. Yes, sir.
That's what I said, I'll rewrite Article 10. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir, Senator Sisler.
I would move that the bill be amended in all applicable provisions to make it available to any county in South Carolina.
Got a motion, second. Comments on that motion? I think that's the appropriate thing to do. Any objection to adopting the amendment presented by Senator Sisler?
Just
Embry?
follow-up question, Senator Davis.
Yep,
if you-
sure.
Was there any discussion about sort of the total amounts of sales tax? I mean, putting a cap on the sales taxes that could be in any given county? Or?
Yeah, I think it's just pretty much what you think you can sell to your electorate. I mean, I can tell you what my intention for Beaufort County would be. We've done 2 rural and critical land issue bonds, one for $50 million, one for $75 million. I think we need one for $500 or $600 million and amortize it over 20 years. That's going to be what I urge our county to do, because we're on the cusp of losing it in Beaufort County unless we do something quickly. So there's no restrictions that are placed on here. But as a practical matter, the larger you make it, the harder the sale becomes to sell to the public.
Since the restriction is the vote of the people.
The vote of the people.
Senator Phelan?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Davis, these green spaces and conservation banks, do they have a shelf life? In other words, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 years from now, for the public good? Can we back this back out, or is it there for?
Well, it would be owned by the county. The county would be the purchasing entity, so they'd be the ones that own the open space, that own the easements that are required. You make a good point. If a county purchases open space under the auspices of a bond referendum saying it's for open space, I don't know as a matter of real property law that they'd be constrained. I think as a matter of politics they'd be constrained. But it'd be a political thing, because there's not. In other words, if a county buys land using that bond proceeds, and say 40, 50 years later they decide they want to do something else with that real property, there's not going to be anything of record that restricts it, like a covenant but I think as a political
Build an
matter.
administration building on it.
What's that? Yeah, but as a political matter, I could see somebody coming along and saying, well, wait a minute, you told us that you were going to raise this penny sales tax to buy property for open space back in 2022, and now here you are in 2045 wanting to make it to administration building. But I think that would be a political question as to whether or not the county would do it or not.
But they could do it if they want.
I don't think there's a legal, and I'm looking at Senator from Lexington, and he's a real estate lawyer too. I don't think there's a restrictive covenant on the property that would encumber it.
Mr. Chairman, the only way would be to put a conservation easement on the property. That's in perpetuity.
And that would be.
Regardless, I mean, if that's what you wanted to achieve,
Yeah.
that's forever.
Would you want to do that?
Well, I mean, what you want to do is give, I think, the county entity maximum flexibility, because a lot of times you can accomplish your objective by not having dense development by buying a conservation easement much more cheaply than buying fee simple title to the whole thing. I guess the comment I made to you, Mr. President, would be, in cases where the county purchases fee simple title to land, it would have the discretion to do something with it. But as Senator Corbin says, if what the county purchases is the conservation easement, I think that would be different. Yeah.
Any further comments, discussion on Senator Setzler's amendment, proposed amendment?
Move favorable report as amended, Mr. Chairman.
Report as amended. Any discussion on that report as amended? Hearing none. Reported out favorable. What's the next one?
Mr. Chairman, I believe that's a bill that we had in subcommittee this morning, and it's Bill H-3605. All this does, this is sort of one of those antiquated bills where you used to hold an open session with the House and the Senate together to discuss the budget and what went on each line item, and that is no longer being done, so this bill just removes that from the code.
I've never heard.
So your recommendation is
Is move out, pass it out as favorable.
Second.
got a motion, second. Discussion on that motion. I see your head nodding yes, so I don't hear any voices. So, any further discussion on it? Hearing none. Any objection to reporting out favorable? Hearing none, it's reported out. What's your next one?
And, Mr. Chairman, this has to do with constitutional officer salaries. We got the salary, agency head salary commission, and this bill from the House would put the constitutional officers also under that agency head salary commission, with the exception that the House did an amendment. The governor and lieutenant governor did not want to be considered in that, so they took the governor and lieutenant governor out of it, and we agreed with it, but Grant pointed out this morning that in order to be consistent, we needed to add the exclusion of the governor, lieutenant governor in Section 2 and Section 3, and we amended the bill to reflect that. So that's all it is puts the constitutional officers under the agency head salary commission.
Senator, the Constitution speaks to their salaries, does it not?
I'm sorry, Mr. Ludman.
The
It's under 11.
Constitution speaks to their salaries, does it not?
Yes, sir.
Wouldn't it take a constitutional amendment? I don't believe we got the authority to. Say again.
The salaries in statute.
Their salaries?
Yes, sir.
I thought the Constitution spelled out what they're paid.
And Mr. Chairman, this is not a pressing item as far as I'm concerned right now. If you want to carry it over and we look into the constitutional issue, we might want to do that. And I don't think any of us thought about it being in the Constitution based on what they make. Because I know, I think some of them have gotten raises, or have they not? And okay. So if you prefer, we can carry it over.
I prefer that, and frankly, I don't believe the Agency Head Salary Commission wants this. Carry over. Any discussion on that motion? Hearing none. Any objection? Hearing none, carried over. Thank you, Senator.
All right, sir.
Excellent.
And Mr. Chairman, just as a matter of information, Mike just informed me that what the Constitution says, and that's why they were doing it now, is it can't be changed. Their salary can't be changed during this elected term. It would have to be done for the next elective term, so.
So the Constitution speaks to that.
Yes, sir.
So it is a constitutional issue.
Yes, sir. And we'll do some more digging.
Okay, thank you.
And the last one that we had this morning was House Bill 4017, which is the IRS conformity bill. And we probably need to get this passed as quick as we can, Mr. Chairman, because a lot of the CPAs have been contacting all of us and wanting us to get it out. Now, what the House amended it, right, Grant, to take that, give the $10,200, to take that out as being taxed by the state, since the feds are not taxing that. And that would be a $61 million hit to the state.
Yes, sir.
So I think Mr. Gibson and Mr. Shealy have determined that we could put in here, and we amended it this morning to say out of the, was it called Rescue Act?
Yes, sir.
Of the federal money, that money can't be used to lower taxes or give tax breaks. But in this particular instance, that money can be used to conform to any federal requirements, and the feds have done this, so we feel like we would be within statute or within regulations to go ahead and use 61.2 or 3 million of that rescue money to offset what we would lose as a state.
So that would be correct if Treasurer, when they send out the final usages, agrees to that. What if they don't agree to it?
Treasury's already sent out that circular.
I'm sorry?
Treasury's already sent out that circular. They've approved this use of it.
So we can use it for that.
So that's our understanding.
And we amended it to reflect that, Mr. Chairman.
Got a amendment coming out of subcommittee. Any further discussion on the amendment and or the bill itself? Senator Bennett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a question. So just to make sure I'm tracking with you here, we're going to conform and exclude from South Carolina income tax unemployment taxes for this year,
Capped at
which is
$10,200.
which is normally a taxable income, but we're going to use federal funds to cover that loss.
Correct.
Right? So the federal government has increased unemployment for months now and caused people not to work in the community.
Absolutely.
So we're going to use their money to pay our taxes.
Absolutely.
I'm for that. I'm for
Okay.
that.
Any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman, just one clarification, if it could.
Alexander.
This is for the 1 year.
1 year. One
Yeah,
year.
yes,
That's,
sir.
that's
It
for
is,
this
it is specifically for tax year
tax year
2020.
2020.
And it's a one-time use.
Any further discussion? We have the amendment proposed by a subcommittee, and I've heard no discussion contrary to that. So, any discussion on the bill as amended? Hearing none. Any objection? Hearing none, will be reported out favorable. What's your next one?
The next bill behind tab 7 is a bill that was pulled out of the Senator Bennett's K-12 Budget Subcommittee. It's a bill relating to the exceptional needs tax credit.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, as Grant just mentioned, we actually pulled this bill out because of timing constraints. We couldn't get the committee together and wanted to make sure we got it on the agenda today because it's pretty important to the exceptional needs community. This is a change to our existing tax credit law. Remember, in the past, we passed an exceptional needs tax credit for people that contribute to exceptional SC, capped out at $12 million a year for the state. And there were some problems with the initial program. We moved it to Department of Revenue to clean up some of those things. But as a result of, one, in my opinion, moving it to the Department of Revenue that really isn't an agency to really market and administer a tax scholarship plan, as well as some changes to federal tax laws, we've run into some problems. The program was very successful for a number of years in really basically almost meeting the $12 million mark. Over the last couple of years, it has not. What this bill does is makes a couple of changes to the existing law. One, it removes DOR from that process, replaces it all back on exceptional SC. Exceptional SC is run by a board, a 5-member board, 2 by Ways and Means, 2 appointed by Senate Finance Chair, and 1 by the governor. Those folks are doing an exceptional job running exceptional SC. So it takes DOR out of that mix. I think DOR is fine with that change. It raises the administrative allowance. Currently, there's a 2% amount of the money that's able to be retained by exceptional SC in order to run the program. It increases that from 2% to 5%. In reality, they just don't have enough money to effectively run the program, market the program, and have somebody full-time that is doing that work. It allows for a carry forward, does not increase the $12 million cap, but does allow for a carry forward for exceptional SC, so that if they get somebody that wants to make some large contributions and they can't fill it, they can still use it in future years to grant scholarships. It increases the donor allowance from 60% of their tax liability to 75%. Remember, it's still capped at $12 million, so there's no fiscal impact to that. Again, just making it a little bit more attractive from a marketing standpoint. And then the other piece that really was the piece that I was concerned about and got some information on earlier is it modifies the testing accountability. In the past, what was done was we made the policy decision that we would have exceptional SC test these kids and report that testing information to us so that we can measure the success of the organization. The problem is that flies in the face of federal law. So it got to the point where they were gathering the data, they were getting the data in, but they couldn't share that with anybody because it identified student level performance as opposed to cohort level. So we're basically allowing them to go back to the previous way that they monitored that testing, which was successful, they think was successful, and provided the information and will allow us to get some data. I think in conversations with staff, I think the testing results are pretty good if we could share them. We just can't share them. So things are going well. I'd be happy to answer any questions, but would move for a favorable report if there are none.
And I've got a question or two. The maximum is 12 million.
Yes, sir, and that does not change.
And going from 60% to 75%.
60% to 75.
Is that on a first come, first served basis?
That's on a first come, first served basis, yes, sir. And if we look at the numbers, Mr. Chairman, as an example, back in 2017, 2018, they served over 2,300 students, and they used up $11 million of the credits were generated, and they used $10 million, almost $11 million to give in scholarships. Compare that to last year, 1,365 students. Only $5 million in tax credits were applied for, of which they paid out the majority of those as well.
Any feel for why the number of tax credits went down?
I think a couple of reasons. One, they aren't able to market the program because they don't have the funds to market the program. And then some federal tax laws didn't make it as attractive as it was previously.
I think one of the things too is a lot of states that have programs like this have these scholarship granting organizations, these private entities that kind of go out there and they beat the bushes and they meet with the corporations, and there's a financial incentive because they're allowed to retain 5% or whatever the percentage is. So there's an economic incentive component to it. I guess the question would be, does that incentive component translate over here to giving them those marketing dollars? And I think in any event, I just make that observation.
I think that's the question, and that's the point, and that's one of the permissions that we're giving in this bill, should we pass it out, is increasing that that from a 2% to a 5% measure, so that they can get out and market the program.
Is it 5%? I
So,
thought you said 3%.
how come you minutes and cetera? So, going from 2 to 5, does that reduce the amount of money available to special needs?
It will, because, I mean, we've got a $12 million cap.
Right.
The argument is we're getting nowhere towards close to the $12 million cap. So we're not even pulling it in. I think we need more in order to pull more in.
But what if we get to 12 million?
I think that's a conversation that we should have in the future. If we get that back up and they're able to recruit those types of contributions, then I think that's a fair conversation to have.
I wonder if we ought to look at amending this, Senator, to where if we reach the 12 million, it automatically goes back to the 2%.
Senator, I'm more than happy to open it up. We didn't have any conversation as you know.
What do you think about that, though?
I'm probably one that leans more towards, let's put the 5% in, and let's let them get to work. And if we've got to change it in the future, I would probably be more inclined, if we hit the 12 million, to come back and argue for, let's increase it to 20 million at that point, than keeping it at 12 and reducing the amount. But I'm open to anything that I think that we can advance the ball and improve the program.
Senator Bannon, you had something.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. See if the subcommittee chair would
Sure.
ask a few questions. First of all, this is not expanding the program, correct?
No.
We're fixing things within the program, and so if someone had some concerns, this is doing nothing to expand. Is that correct?
That's correct.
We're seeing a decline.
Well, it is looking to expand the program by taking full advantage of the program we have.
Correct, and I didn't
Yes.
mean that. I'm
Yeah.
saying is that we're not.
We're not expanding from 12 million to 50 million, no.
Thank you. We've seen the money raised decline. Why would we, in other functions, if we were seeing money decline, why would we want to allow them to keep more for administration? I think you're getting maybe to some marketing as an answer, but traditionally we don't reward an entity that is having trouble doing what they've asked them to do by allowing them to almost, I guess, more than double the amount of money that we keep. Is it as simple as just marketing?
I think it's a combination of marketing, and you didn't have an agency in charge of it that was built for that at DOR. I mean, you just didn't.
Cecily, you had something.
Early on when we were doing good, because they were collecting money good at first, were they doing a better job marketing then? What did they offer an explanation of why they were collecting good money and then it went downhill?
Well, I think prior to that, the tax laws were a little more advantageous, and I think they were doing more marketing. There was more outreach to those folks.
And last question is, it appears as if there is a little bit less either accountability or monitoring by state agencies on them. Should we have less accountability when we're giving them more freedom, if I'm asking that? And I follow your argument, and I plan on supporting this, but I guess my question is, they've been having trouble, and we're going to give them more. They're going to get to more than double the amount of money they get to keep, and they'll no longer have DOR over them. It appears that there's less accountability watching them. You've said that we should have faith in the members that are on their board, and I do. But do you see the conflict of that? Do you think it's worth the risk, I guess is the way of framing it as a question?
If you believe that there is risk, then I would say, yes, I believe that it's worth the risk.
Thank you.
I think the organization has clearly shown a turnaround from the times where there were problems. Yeah.
I assume we will follow up maybe next
Absolutely.
year and
Sure.
share.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
That's a,
Well, I want to follow up. I think the last question, in particular, Senator Fairfield asked, is a great question, Senator from Dorchester. In this era of shining light and having full disclosure, wouldn't it be better to have them at least report annually to the two finance committees of the House and Senate? Or somebody, so that somebody looks at it annually? That's really not the issue I wanted to ask you that, but I just throw that out as a thought. How much can one individual claim in the tax credits?
Up to 75% of their tax liability.
So one person could take the whole 12 million if they made enough money.
I guess technically they could if they wanted to donate $12 million, and that was,
Is there any thought to doing what we did with the research authority this last time through in order to let more people take advantage of it, to say each individual can only get X number of dollars the first round, and after 30 days, if it's not used up, then come back and take a second bite at the apple too. And frankly, that may help them with their marketing.
yeah.
You get more of not just what I call the big boys.
Yeah, Senator, I would probably, and I don't have a breakdown of the big boys, but I would tell you just by the numbers, if there's a big boy, there's one, and nobody else is claiming it, because we're not coming anywhere close to the $12 million. I mean, we're under 50% of what is being utilized. So I don't think anybody right now is being locked out of the process. If there were that, I think I would be concerned about that.
I do like the idea of reporting at least annually.
I'm not opposed to that, Senator.
so you won't propose an amendment?
Well, I can, Mr. Chairman, just that they annually report to the Senate Finance Committee and the House Ways and Means what they did the previous year as to who the recipients were, how much, et cetera, how much they raised, how much they spent, so that we are aware of that.
I think Grant might have some insight on that.
Yes, sir. In the not in the bill you had before, but in the root legislation of this, and this is one of the things Senator Bennett and I talked about. So there's maybe one technical amendment to put in here, but the current law says by January 15th of each year, the department reports to the Senate Finance, Ways and Means, and the governor the number and total amount of grants issued to eligible schools, the identity of the school and the amount of the grant, an itemized and detailed explanation of fees and other revenues obtained from on behalf of the schools, a copy of a compilation review or audit of the fund's financial statements conducted by a CPA, and the criteria and eligibility requirements for scholarship awards. So that's currently in the law.
And Mr. Chairman, if I could, in today's wonderful world of technology, I can also tell you that the average donation is $15,000.
So you're reaching the little guy.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Any further discussion?
Move for adoption.
Do you want to do that technical amendment to take the department out? Let the
Yes.
public.
Yes, please.
You got something else you want to propose?
You want to put that forward, Grant?
As part of it, as Senator Bennett explained, there's right below there's that requirement that the department reports these things. If the department takes out of this, it seemed appropriate that the public charity would be the one that reports that. So the further amendment to clarify that would be to take the department out in item 5 and say the public charity reports these things.
Any discussion on this last proposed amendment? Hearing none, any objection? Hearing none, it's adopted. So Cindy, you now move to report out favorable as amended. Motion second, any further discussion on that? Hearing none, any objection, reporting out favorable? Hearing none, it's reported out. Is that it, Grant?
Yes, sir. That concludes your agenda.
Thank y'all for coming.